The screech of a suitcase dragged across the aisle, a cold voice cutting through the polished silence of first class. "Sorry, this seat isn't yours." What began as an ordinary flight became the spark of a global storm. In seat 2A stood Jordan Blake, a man in a simple hoodie, holding nothing more than a crumpled boarding pass. To many, he looked like just another tired traveler. But when a platinum member refused to move, and the crew chose convenience over fairness, no one in that cabin imagined what was about to unfold. Because Jordan was not just another passenger. He was the CEO who secretly owned the majority of the airline. And that night, every camera lens and every whispered doubt became witnesses to a reckoning. What would you do if the seat you paid for was denied to you simply because of how you looked? Would you stay silent, or would you stand your ground even when the world told you to move? Stay with us as we uncover the story that shook the skies and redefined dignity itself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. The wheels of a carry-on suitcase scraped against the polished tile, their echo sharp against the quiet hum of an evening terminal. The sound was ordinary, almost comforting, but to Jordan Blake, it carried the weight of exhaustion. 3 days of back-to-back meetings in Manhattan had left his body heavy, his mind fogged. He had not slept more than 5 hours in total. His hoodie felt like armor, his sneakers an act of rebellion against the suffocating ties and tailored suits that had clung to him all week. When he stepped through the wide glass doors into the first-class cabin of Skyreach Airlines Flight 847, Jordan breathed in the smell of leather and faint citrus polish. The seats gleamed with Italian stitching, each row spaced like a private domain. He wanted nothing more than to sink into seat 2A, shut his eyes, and let the roar of the engines lull him into silence. But silence did not come. Seat 2A was already occupied. The woman sitting there didn't glance up right away. She was blonde, her hair styled in careful waves that seemed as rigid as her posture. Her nails, painted crimson, tapped against the glowing screen of her phone. Images of beach villas and sprawling estates slid by. To her, the world was a portfolio of ownership. When Jordan stopped in front of her row, suitcase still in hand, she finally spoke, her voice coated in sweetness that chilled more than it warmed. "Sorry, but this isn't your seat." The air thickened, the kind of pause that ripples through a room even when no one admits they are listening. Jordan blinked once, his face unreadable. In his hand, the crumpled boarding pass clearly displayed the numbers and letters 2A. He cleared his throat softly, his voice calm but firm. "This is my seat." Only then did she lift her eyes, icy blue and sharp with appraisal. Her lips curled into a smirk that was half amusement, half contempt. "I think there's been a mistake," she said. "I'm a platinum member. They'll find you another place, something more appropriate." That word appropriate slid into Jordan's chest like a blade. Around them, the first-class cabin shifted. Some passengers flicked their eyes upward, curiosity piqued, while others bent closer to their screens, desperate to appear uninvolved. A man in a gray suit coughed nervously. The cabin, once silent, was now an invisible theater, every pair of eyes pretending not to watch, yet watching all the same. Inside Jordan, old memories stirred. Harvard lecture halls where he had been the only black student. Boardrooms where his words were met with polite nods but skeptical eyes. Even after decades of building Blake Aeronautics, even after becoming one of the most powerful men in aerospace, he had never escaped that look, someone silently asking whether he belonged. For a moment, he considered sighing, turning away, letting it slide. He was tired. He had spent years fighting battles far greater than this, and perhaps this was not worth his energy. But then he looked at the boarding pass again, its numbers crisp, undeniable, and he realized that if he walked away now, the wound would not just be in his pride. It would cut deeper, a reminder that dignity could be dismissed like a delayed flight. He drew a slow breath. His voice, when it came, was steady as stone. "This is seat 2A, and it belongs to me." The smirk on her face hardened into challenge. She tilted her chin slightly, her tone sharp enough to cut through the murmurs beginning to swirl in the cabin. "My dear, do you know where you are? This is first class. People don't wear hoodies and sneakers here. This is our world." Each word landed like a slap. Jordan's pulse quickened, but his body remained still. Years of negotiation had trained him to hold emotion behind a mask, to let silence carry weight where anger would only scatter it. His mind argued in two voices. One told him to sit down somewhere else, avoid the scene, keep peace. The other, darker but stronger, told him that peace purchased with silence was no peace at all. He glanced at his watch, a Patek Philippe hidden beneath the sleeve of his hoodie, not to check the time, but to steady himself. The polished face reflected a man who had spent his life proving himself in rooms that doubted him. Was he going to keep proving? Forever. Before he could answer himself, she laughed, a short, dry sound that carried across the luxury cabin. First class is not a place for charity cases fishing for upgrades. I've been flying with Skyreach for 12 years. People like me get priority. Whispers rustled through the cabin like a sudden gust of wind. Some passengers exchanged glances. Others looked away, ashamed but unwilling to intervene. Jordan let the words hang in the air. Rage pressed against his chest, begging release, but he restrained it. His eyes burned, not with anger alone, but with a tiredness so deep it felt like grief. How many times would he have to stand on the fault line between prejudice and dignity? How many times would the burden be his alone? His voice, when it finally emerged, was low, but carried across the rows with clarity. "Ma'am, I need you to check your boarding pass again." She rolled her eyes, waving the platinum card between two fingers as though it were a weapon. "I know how this airline treats loyal customers. Trust me. You'll be moved. Moved. As if he were cargo." Jordan's jaw tightened. He lowered his suitcase to the carpet, the soft thud echoing louder than it should have. He leaned slightly forward, his tone sharpening, though his volume never rose. "This seat is mine, and I will sit in it." The smirk faltered. For the first time, her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but pride rallied quickly. "You'll see. Someone like you could never keep this seat." The phrase "someone like you" sliced the last thread of hesitation inside him. Jordan's eyes swept across the cabin, taking in every passenger pretending not to watch. A man reading a magazine but not turning a page. A couple whispering into each other's ears. A young woman in the third row, discreetly lifting her phone, red recording light blinking. This was no longer just about him. The theater had its audience. The play had begun. Jordan let out a slow exhale. He could almost hear the engines outside, humming like a storm waiting to be unleashed. And in that storm, he saw himself not as a tired traveler, but as something larger. He leaned back, straightened his spine, and allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips. "Mrs. Langford," he said softly, his words deliberate. "You've chosen the wrong man to challenge." The silence that followed was heavier than turbulence. Every passenger felt it. Phones shifted slightly higher. The cabin was no longer a place of rest. It had become a stage, and Jordan Blake had just stepped into the role he was born to play. Jordan Blake kept his eyes steady on Victoria Langford, his boarding pass still resting in his palm like a quiet weapon. Around him, the air of first class pulsed with a tension that no one dared name aloud. Some passengers sipped their champagne with mechanical precision, their movements too sharp, too forced. Others leaned ever so slightly into the aisle, unable to resist the pull of the confrontation. The hum of the engines outside was faint, distant, but inside the cabin every sound was magnified. The clicking of a pen in row 3, the crinkle of a newspaper folded but unread, even the shallow breaths of those trying not to be caught staring. Jordan did not raise his voice. He simply held his ground, the way he had held his ground 1,000 times before, in meetings, in negotiations, in conversations where his presence alone had been treated as an intrusion. Victoria laughed again, a brittle sound, though her eyes betrayed the flicker of unease that her smirk tried to conceal. She raised her platinum card high enough for nearby passengers to see, as though it were a badge of honor. "You don't understand," she said, her tone dripping with superiority. "I've flown this airline for over a decade. People like me are the backbone of Skyreach. They don't just give away platinum status. Loyalty matters here, more than a piece of paper." She gestured with a glance toward the crumpled boarding pass in Jordan's hand, dismissing it as if it were no more than a bus ticket. Jordan's lips pressed into a thin line. His pulse thudded at his temples, but his exterior remained composed. He wanted to tell her what that piece of paper meant, how he had paid for this seat with his own credit card just like anyone else. He wanted to remind her that the money behind it would cover more than the yearly salary of the very flight attendant who had scanned it at the gate. But he didn't. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost intimate, yet sharp enough to cut the air. "Loyalty does not replace fairness. Mrs. Langford." For a second her smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered, tossing her hair with a little scoff. "Fairness," she repeated, rolling the word on her tongue as if it were a foreign concept. "What's fair is recognizing who keeps the airline alive. Customers like me. What's fair is knowing your place." The phrase "your place" sent a chill down Jordan's spine. He inhaled slowly, forcing his heartbeat into rhythm, refusing to let her words pull him into a storm he would regret. From the third row, the faint glow of a phone camera caught his eye. A young woman with dark hair, no more than 20 perhaps, angled her phone discreetly, her gaze darting between the screen and the scene before her. Jordan caught the red dot of recording and held her gaze for the briefest moment. She blinked, but did not lower her phone. The silent theater of first class had found its chronicler. Victoria leaned back in the seat as though declaring victory. She crossed her legs with exaggerated elegance, tugging at the hem of her silk blouse. Her nails tapped against the armrest, each click punctuating her claim of ownership over space that was not hers. "You'll see," she said with airy confidence. "They'll come and sort this out, and you'll be moved. You can't possibly believe this is going to end your way." Jordan studied her for a long moment. His jaw clenched, but his voice remained level, infused with a calm that was not born of ease but of discipline. "This seat is mine, and I will sit in it. No one is moving me anywhere." A ripple moved through the cabin. A man in a business suit lowered his newspaper, revealing eyes that darted nervously from Jordan to Victoria. An elderly couple exchanged a glance, the wife's lips pressing thin as though recalling some private memory of humiliation. Victoria's laugh returned, sharper this time, louder, carrying across the cabin as if she wanted to ensure every passenger heard her declaration. "Oh, please, Do you even know how things work up here? This is first class. This is not economy where anyone can sit anywhere. There are standards. People like me keep those standards alive. People like you." She let the words hang deliberately before finishing with a knife-edge whisper. "You are just passing through." The words sank into Jordan's chest like a stone dropped into deep water. His mind pulled at old threads, memories he thought he had sealed away. He was back in Cambridge, standing in a lecture hall where a professor had asked him to repeat his answer, not because it was wrong, but because no one expected him to be right. He was back in a corporate boardroom in Houston, where a partner had assumed he was the assistant rather than the lead engineer. He was back in his 20s, walking into high-end restaurants only to feel the weight of eyes measuring his clothes, his accent, his skin. How many times had he been told he was just passing through? He gripped the boarding pass tighter, the paper crumpling further in his palm. His internal voice split into two. One whispered surrender. "Let it go. You're tired. Just take another seat. This fight will drain you. No one here will thank you." The other voice rose louder, steadier. "If you move, you confirm her world. If you move, tomorrow someone else will be told they don't belong. If you move, silence wins." Jordan drew a breath so deep it anchored him. He placed his suitcase upright by his side, the wheels aligned neatly with the aisle, as though even in the chaos he demanded order. He raised his eyes, locking on Victoria with a gaze so steady it forced her to shift in her seat. "You may think this seat belongs to you because of a card, but it belongs to me because I paid for it, and because fairness does not bend to arrogance." The tone of his words vibrated through the cabin. A few passengers inhaled sharply, the sound loud in the stillness. Victoria's smirk faltered again. She leaned forward, her voice rising. "You think you can stand here and lecture me? I've been here since boarding. I am not moving. Call the crew. Let's see who they believe." Her challenge rang out like a bell, summoning the next act of the play. A middle-aged man in the aisle seat cleared his throat but said nothing. His eyes, however, betrayed his discomfort, flicking toward Jordan with something like sympathy. The elderly woman in row 4 leaned closer to her husband, whispering words too soft to catch. But her expression carried an old sorrow. Jordan remained still, his face composed. Yet inside, the weight of decades pressed down. He was tired of carrying this burden alone, tired of pretending that silence was easier. But here it was again, demanding his decision. He closed his eyes briefly. He pictured his father, who had once told him in a voice rough from factory shifts, "Every time they try to tell you you don't belong, you stand taller, because your place is wherever you paid to be." Jordan opened his eyes. They burned now, not with rage, but with resolve. "Mrs. Langford," he said, his tone calm but final. "You can deny the paper in my hand. You can deny the truth in my words, but you cannot deny that this seat is mine, and I am not moving." The silence that followed was thick as smoke. The tension had reached a new height, pulling every passenger into its gravity. Even those who had pretended disinterest now leaned forward, their curiosity undeniable. The red light on Maya Chen's phone glowed brighter, the live stream silently collecting strangers across the internet into this cabin of conflict. Victoria's face flushed. She opened her mouth to retort but hesitated, caught off guard by the steel in Jordan's tone. Her eyes flickered across the cabin, searching for support, for someone to validate her claim. None came. The play had shifted. The audience was no longer just watching. They were waiting. Jordan leaned back slightly, folding his boarding pass carefully now, his hands steady, his voice lowered, carrying not just to Victoria, but to the entire cabin. Fairness cannot be sacrificed for convenience. Not here, not today. The words hung suspended in the air, heavier than the aircraft itself. And in that stillness, the battle lines were drawn. The silence in the first-class cabin stretched like a wire pulled taut. Jordan Blake sat rooted in the aisle, his suitcase upright beside him, his boarding pass folded neatly in his hand. Across from him, Victoria Langford leaned smugly against the headrest, her platinum card resting on her lap like a badge of nobility. Around them, the passengers shifted in their seats, the quiet hum of the engines outside contrasting with the storm gathering within. Then came the clicking of heels against carpet, rhythmic, controlled, the sound of someone practiced in stepping into chaos and wearing poise as armor. The chief flight attendant had arrived. Lena Morris appeared at the front of the cabin, her navy uniform pressed to perfection, her smile painted on with the precision of someone who had repeated it thousands of times. Her hair was pinned neatly back, not a strand out of place. To most passengers, she was the embodiment of calm professionalism, but Jordan's eyes were sharper than most. Behind the curve of her smile, he caught a flicker of impatience. "What seems to be the issue here?" Lena asked, her voice smooth, designed to soothe. Victoria straightened instantly, as though she had been waiting for this moment. Her tone rose, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, dripping with indignation. "Thank you for coming. I'm so relieved. I've been sitting here in 2A from the start, but this passenger insists it's his. I'm a platinum member. You see, I shouldn't have to defend my seat like this." The words, "this passenger," landed with deliberate force. Several passengers winced, recognizing the disdain hidden inside them. Lena turned to Jordan with a polished smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Please." Jordan extended it calmly. Lena took it, her eyes scanning quickly. The numbers and letters could not be mistaken. 2A. She hesitated for the briefest moment before lifting her gaze. "Yes, this is indeed your seat, Mr. Blake." A wave of relief rippled through Jordan's chest. At last, recognition. But it was short-lived. Lena drew in a sharp breath, her professional tone wrapping around the words that came next like velvet covering steel. However, "Mrs. Langford is one of our long-standing loyal customers. We deeply value her relationship with Skyreach. To avoid conflict, we can offer you seat 3C instead. It's very spacious and comfortable." The words dropped into Jordan's ears like a dull roar. For a moment he wondered if he had misheard. But the look in Lena's eyes, the way she tilted her chin with subtle firmness, confirmed what he already knew. She was not asking. She was directing. Across the cabin, a man shook his head slightly. The elderly couple whispered again. The young woman with the phone camera adjusted her angle, her screen glowing brighter. The tension in the cabin thickened into something unbreathable. Jordan felt a heaviness seep into his bones. Not rage this time, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of decades of being asked, in ways small and large, to accept less than what was rightfully his. He thought of the countless negotiations he had led, the times he had seen corporate leaders smile as they pushed for the safe solution. Always the same script. Sacrifice the one who could be sacrificed to appease the one who was perceived as more valuable. Was this what his life would always be? Even here, in first class, on a seat he had paid for, in an airline he himself controlled from the shadows. Jordan's jaw tightened. He met Lena's eyes. His voice came slow, each word dropping heavy into the air. "Are you suggesting that I give up the seat I paid for simply to satisfy another passenger's request?" Lena blinked. Her smile tightened, its polish cracking ever so slightly. Before she could respond, Victoria cut in, her voice sharp as glass. "Exactly. You see, even the flight attendant understands. A platinum member like me deserves comfort. He's just a passerby." The words of passerby rang through the cabin like shards of ice. Jordan saw heads turn. A middle-aged man furrowed his brow. The elderly black passenger 2 rows back shook his head, whispering to his wife, "Same old story." Jordan inhaled slowly. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, but his voice was calm, still as a lake. "I appreciate the effort to keep peace," he said evenly, "but fairness cannot be sacrificed for convenience. I will sit in the seat that is mine." First class trembled under the weight of his words. The silence was not passive now. It vibrated, as if the very air was waiting for the storm to break. Victoria's laugh sliced through it, shrill and strained. "How absurd! You think this seat is yours just because of a printed slip of paper. This is first class. This is our world." Her arrogance filled the space, but not without resistance. From behind her, the journalist, Isabella Cruz, her press badge glinting faintly against her blouse, raised her phone and quietly began recording. Her pen tapped against a small notebook in her lap. Jordan leaned forward slightly. His eyes locked on Victoria. His voice dropped low, cold but unwavering. "You're right, Mrs. Langford. This is a world of power. But you've forgotten something. True power doesn't lie in a loyalty card." For the first time, Victoria's confidence flickered. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Lena's lips parted as if to intervene, but she, too, seemed caught off guard. Jordan leaned back again, folding his arms across his chest. He would not move. He could not. Not this time. The cabin had fallen silent once more. But it was a silence transformed. It was no longer the silence of bystanders unwilling to interfere. It was the silence of witnesses, of an audience sensing they were watching something far larger than a dispute over a seat. The hum of the engines pressed against the windows. The overhead lights glowed faintly golden, and in that fragile quiet, Jordan felt the weight of choice pressing on him again. He could still yield. He could still let Lena move him to 3C and the world would go on. But in that moment, he realized that if he yielded, he would not only lose a seat, he would lose something far greater. He thought of the younger passengers watching him now, the law student with her phone, the journalist with her pen, the elderly man remembering his son. What lesson would they carry if he gave in? That silence was the safer path, that arrogance would always win. His father's words echoed again, rough and unpolished, but steady. "Every time they tell you to step aside, you stand taller." Jordan's shoulders straightened. He felt his breath settle, his heartbeat fall into rhythm. He looked at Lena, then at Victoria, then at the cabin as a whole. "No," he said softly but firmly, his voice carrying through every row. "This is not about a seat. It's about respect, and I will not move." The stillness that followed felt like the pause before thunder. No one pretended to read. No one pretended to sip wine. The cabin had become a courtroom, the verdict not yet spoken, but the arguments sharp and unforgettable. And Jordan Blake had just drawn the line that none of them could ignore. The hush in the cabin was almost unbearable now. The air smelled faintly of leather and recycled oxygen, yet beneath it lay something sharper, the scent of unease. Jordan Blake remained standing at the edge of row 2, his posture unshaken. Victoria Langford still clutched the armrests of seat 2A, her platinum card gleaming in her hand like a weapon she believed invincible. Chief Flight Attendant Lena Morris shifted from one polished heel to the other. She was trained for turbulence, for medical emergencies, for angry customers demanding champagne refills. But this was different. This was not service. This was a battle over dignity, unfolding in front of dozens of watchful eyes and an unknown number beyond the glowing phone screens. "Please," Lena tried again, her voice laced with manufactured calm. "Let us keep the peace. Mr. Blake, seat 3C is perfectly fine. It is just a short flight. We can solve this quickly." Jordan lifted his gaze toward her, his dark eyes steady, and for the first time, her polished tone faltered under the weight of his stare. His words followed, measured and deliberate. Peace is not bought by asking one person to surrender what is rightfully his. The words echoed, subtle but cutting. The elderly couple in row 4 nodded softly, their lips pressed thin as though the line had unlocked an old truth. Victoria scoffed, the sharp sound bouncing against the cabin walls. "Are we really going to waste everyone's time on this, I told you? I've flown with Skyreach for 12 years. My loyalty gives me priority. He should be grateful he is even in this section." The comment drew murmurs. A man across the aisle frowned openly. Another shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath. The law student, Maya Chen, lowered her phone briefly to whisper to the person beside her. "People are watching. Thousands already. Look at the comments." Then she raised the phone again, catching every movement, every syllable. Jordan felt the shift. The silence that had once been indifference was becoming something else, a current of recognition, a collective unease at the arrogance on display. He exhaled slowly, tamping down the anger rising in his chest. His voice, when it came, was calm but resonant. "Loyalty does not mean ownership, Mrs. Langford, and priority does not mean privilege." Victoria's eyes widened, the veneer of confidence cracking for a brief second before she recovered. She laughed again, though the sound was brittle now. "You speak like a lawyer, but this isn't a courtroom. This is an airline, and airlines understand who deserves comfort." She turned to Lena, her voice rising in theatrical indignation. "Why is this taking so long? Do your job, remove him. He is disturbing the peace." The phrase "disturb the peace" drew sharp breaths from several passengers. A man in the front row muttered, "Unbelievable." Isabella Cruz, the journalist, scribbled furiously in her notebook while her phone remained lifted, recording every moment. Lena's hands tightened at her sides. She looked at Jordan, then at Victoria. Her training screamed at her to de-escalate, to resolve without confrontation. But the usual script was unraveling in her hands. "Mrs. Langford, please," she said cautiously, "let us not escalate. We are trying to find a solution." But Victoria was not to be contained. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with superiority. "The solution is simple. Move him. I am not leaving this seat. I am a platinum member. I deserve it. And he," her voice dropped, dripping with disdain, "is making a scene for attention." The accusation stung. Jordan's breath caught for a second, not because her words were new, but because they were too familiar. How many times had he been told that standing firm was making a scene, that asking for fairness was being difficult? He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. His father's voice again came back, that refrain carved into his memory. "Stand taller." When he opened them, his gaze swept across the cabin. locking on the faces that watched him. He saw discomfort, but also something else. Quiet agreement, the sense that the tide was turning. He straightened fully, his shoulders square, his voice calm but filled with quiet thunder. This is not about loyalty tiers or platinum cards. It is about one fact. I paid for this seat. This boarding pass says 2A. That is all that matters. The elderly black man in row 4, Thomas Gray, cleared his throat and spoke for the first time. His voice was low but steady, carrying across the rows. He is right. I've seen this too many times. My son once had his first-class ticket dismissed because he wore a hoodie. They pushed him into economy, said he didn't belong. We stayed silent then. Maybe we should not stay silent now. The words landed heavy, breaking the wall of passivity. A ripple of nods followed. Even those who avoided Jordan's gaze shifted uncomfortably, as though realizing that their silence had weight. Maya Chen's phone trembled slightly in her hand as she whispered to her live stream. Did you hear that another passenger just spoke up? This isn't just a seat dispute. It's discrimination. Her voice carried urgency, and the comment stream on her phone scrolled faster and faster. Victoria's face flushed with anger. She slammed her hand against the armrest, her eyes blazing. This is outrageous. You all don't understand. People like me have built this airline with loyalty and money. People like him come and go. He doesn't deserve to sit here. Gaffes scattered through the cabin. Isabella Cruz lowered her pen, her voice clear and sharp as she spoke from row 3. Excuse me, Mrs. Langford, but I am a journalist. I have witnessed everything. Mr. Blake has a valid boarding pass for this seat. You do not? If anyone is disturbing the peace, it is you. Victoria's mouth fell open, her arrogance cracking under the weight of public confrontation. She stammered, but no words formed. Lena raised her hands, her voice trembling slightly now. Please, everyone, let us calm down. This is getting out of hand. We can reassign seats, find another arrangement. We must think of the smooth operation of the flight. Jordan's voice cut through hers, low but unyielding. No, this is not about smooth operation. This is about respect. If I move quietly today, then tomorrow someone else will be treated the same way, and the cycle will never end. The cabin stilled. His words landed like stones dropped into water, sending ripples across every row. Lena swallowed hard, her polished smile gone now, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Victoria's hands shook where they gripped the armrest. Passengers whispered more openly. Phones tilted higher, recording angles shifting, every lens capturing not just a man and a woman, but the collision of arrogance and dignity. Jordan's heartbeat pounded in his chest, but he no longer felt tired. He no longer felt alone. For the first time in that cabin, he felt the presence of witnesses who understood. He turned slightly toward them, his voice softer now, but no less firm. This is not only my fight. It is every fight where silence has been demanded in exchange for convenience. Today, I will not be silent. The applause was not loud, not yet, but a few hands clapped softly, enough to be heard, enough to tip the balance. Victoria shrank into the seat, her lips trembling, though her pride would not let her back down fully. This isn't over, she hissed under her breath. Jordan sat finally, lowering himself into 2A with deliberate calm. His suitcase slid neatly under the seat in front of him, his hands folded across his lap, his posture unshaken. He had claimed what was his, but he knew this was only the beginning. The storm was far from over. The first-class cabin had grown so heavy with silence that even the soft hum of the engines seemed distant. as though the aircraft itself were holding its breath. Jordan Blake sat firmly in seat 2A now, his shoulders squared, his gaze steady on the aisle. Victoria Langford, flushed and trembling, remained rigid beside him. The platinum card in her hand shook, its plastic edge no longer a shield, but a fragile remnant of pride. Chief Flight Attendant Lena Morris lingered in the aisle, her perfect posture faltering, her hands clasped tightly in front of her waist, her knuckles pale. She looked from Jordan to Victoria and back again, every instinct in her body urging her to press for compromise, to restore calm at any cost. But calm no longer seemed possible. Then the sound came, the soft click of the cockpit door opening, the creak of hinges too small to matter under normal circumstances, but now loud enough to draw every eye. Captain Daniel Ruiz stepped into the cabin. He was a man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair cropped short and a face carved by 3 decades of transatlantic flights. His presence carried the weight of command. Every step he took toward row 2 was measured, steady, each one sinking into the thick carpet like a drumbeat of authority. Passengers straightened in their seats. A ripple of whispers spread. Phones lifted higher. Maya Chen adjusted her camera angle to capture the captain as he approached, her livestream chat scrolling faster than her eyes could follow. Isabella Cruz closed her notebook, her pen hovering in readiness. Victoria seized the moment with dramatic flair. She rose halfway from her seat, her voice loud and theatrical, vibrating with false indignation. "Thank God you are here, Captain. I am a platinum member of Skyreach. This man is harassing me, claiming my seat, disturbing the peace. Please, do something." The word harassing hung in the air like a bomb. Several passengers gasped. Others shook their heads knowingly, recognizing the tactic, the familiar weapon of twisting truth into victimhood. Jordan did not move. He sat straight-backed, his hands folded on the tray table, his eyes locked on the captain. He had no need to defend himself yet. His silence alone was a mirror, reflecting the cracks in Victoria's performance. Captain Ruiz gave Victoria a brief nod, then turned his gaze to Jordan. His eyes, though weathered, were sharp. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Jordan unfolded the slip of paper and handed it to him. The captain glanced at it, the number clear and indisputable. 2A. The truth was plain, but then Ruiz's eyes shifted to Victoria. She held up her platinum card like a banner, her chin high, her expression taut with expectation. And in that single moment, Jordan recognized something he had seen countless times before the temptation of authority to choose convenience over justice. "Yes," Ruiz said slowly, as if weighing each syllable. "This is indeed your seat, Mr. Blake." He paused, then added, "However, Mrs. Langford is one of our most valued customers. For the smooth operation of the flight, perhaps you could move to another seat, also first class, equally comfortable." The cabin froze. The suggestion echoed through the rows like the tolling of a bell. Passengers stiffened. The elderly couple exchanged a knowing glance. The wife's lips pressed tight. Thomas Gray shook his head, whispering again to his wife. "Same old story." Victoria exhaled triumphantly. A smirk tugged at her lips. "You see, even the captain understands. You should be reasonable. People like me are always given priority." Her words scraped against the walls of the cabin like shards of glass. Jordan felt a chill course down his spine, not of fear, but of recognition. The pattern was the same. Everywhere, always. The rightful was asked to yield. The arrogant was appeased. The institution chose convenience. He drew in a slow breath. Steadying himself, he folded the boarding pass once more and placed it carefully on the tray table. His voice, when it came, was so calm that it sent a shiver through several passengers. "Captain Ruiz, may I ask you something?" The older man tilted his head slightly. "Yes, sir." "Since when does Skyreach allow one passenger to take another seat simply because they are familiar faces?" The question sliced through the air like a blade. Ruiz hesitated, his eyes flickering uneasily toward Lena, then back to Jordan. He cleared his throat. "We only want the flight to proceed smoothly. Sometimes flexibility is required." Jordan's lips curved into a faint smile, one without joy. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on the captain's. Flexibility, or compromise with injustice. The words landed heavy. Several passengers shifted, the silence broken only by the faint clicking of Maya Chen's phone as she zoomed closer. Her livestream chat exploded. Victoria let out a sharp laugh, her voice high and strained. "This is only a seat. Only someone fishing for compensation would make such a scene." The word compensation struck the cabin like lightning. A murmur spread. Isabella Cruz's pen scratched furiously across her notebook. Thomas Gray sighed, his voice heavy with memory. Same old script. He murmured again. Jordan remained steady, his voice low but resonant. "Smoothly for whom? Captain. For Mrs. Langford. So she can believe she has the right to take any seat she wants. Or for the airline. So it can avoid facing the truth that its system enables injustice." The captain's jaw tightened. Sweat beaded faintly on his forehead. He was a man used to storms in the sky, not storms of dignity within the cabin. Victoria slammed her hand on the armrest, her voice cracking with anger and panic. "Enough! I will not be insulted by someone like him." "Captain, call security. He is the one causing trouble." The phrase "someone like him" struck like a whip. Passengers inhaled sharply, some wincing as if the sting had landed on their own skin. Isabella Cruz rose from her seat in row 3, her voice clear and unwavering. "Excuse me, but I have witnessed everything. Mr. Blake has a valid boarding pass for seat 2A. Mrs. Langford does not. If anyone is causing trouble here, it is her." Gasps and murmurs erupted. Someone in the back whistled in agreement. Maya Chen whispered into her phone's camera, her voice trembling with urgency. "We are witnessing blatant discrimination. The live stream is exploding. Over 3,000 viewers now." Lena raised her hands desperately, her voice trembling. "Please, everyone, calm down. This is just a small seating issue. We can solve it." "No," Jordan interrupted, his tone low but thunderous. "This is not about a seat. It is about respect. If I move today, then tomorrow someone else will be treated the same way, and the cycle will never end." The cabin fell into stillness. His words, soft but unyielding, carved themselves into the minds of those listening. Passengers no longer hid behind screens or newspapers. They leaned forward, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Jordan lowered his voice, each word deliberate. "Mrs. Langford, Captain Ruiz, Miss Morris, you do not know the truth because I have never spoken it aloud. But today I will." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with the unmistakable logo of Blake Aero Systems. A few passengers gasped, recognizing it instantly, the company that had reshaped aviation technology in recent years. Jordan's gaze swept the cabin, his voice sharp and final. "You are looking at the majority shareholder of Skyreach Airlines. 59% of this company belongs to me." The cabin erupted, gasps, whispers, frantic camera clicks. Victoria's face drained of color, her lips quivering. The captain froze, his eyes wide. his authority stripped bare in a single sentence. Lena's hand shook visibly, regret flooding her expression, and Jordan Blake sat calm, unyielding, his presence no longer that of a passenger. He had become the storm. For a moment, there was no sound, no cough, no shifting seatbelt, not even the usual whisper of hands against leather. The cabin of Skyreach Flight 847 had fallen into stunned silence, the kind that only comes when truth slices through a room so sharply that no one dares breathe. Jordan Blake sat steady in seat 2A, his phone glowing in his hand, the logo of Blake Aerosystems shining unmistakably on the screen. His words still hung in the air. 59% of this company belongs to me. The shock was absolute. Phones tilted higher. Camera flashes flickered. A ripple of disbelief rolled through the passengers. Victoria Langford's face drained to a paper-white pallor. Her lips parted, trembling, but no words came. She clutched her platinum card like a relic that had suddenly lost its power, her manicured nails digging into the plastic until it bent slightly. Captain Ruiz froze, his hand tightening around the brim of his cap. Decades in the cockpit had prepared him for lightning storms and failing engines, but not for this storm of dignity erupting inside his own cabin. His voice rasped, hesitant. "Mr. Blake, I had no idea." Jordan's gaze cut to him, calm but razor sharp. "That is the problem. Captain, you always choose the easy way. Whoever looks less powerful gets pushed aside. It never matters who is right." Lena Morris, the chief flight attendant, stood rooted in place, her polished shoes suddenly heavy. She had suggested he move, her words still echoing in her own mind like a verdict against herself. Her lips parted, trembling. I was only trying to follow procedure." Jordan's dark eyes met hers, not with anger, but with piercing truth. "You did think, and you decided I was the one with less power. That is how injustice survives." A shiver rippled through Lena's body. She lowered her head, shame flushing her cheeks. From the fourth row, Thomas Gray, the elderly black passenger, spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of years. "My son went through the same thing, paid for first class, forced into economy, because he looked like this man does now." He pointed gently toward Jordan, and we stayed silent. Too long we have stayed silent. The word struck something deep in the cabin. Murmurs spread, no longer hesitant, but charged with recognition. Isabel Cruz, the journalist, lifted her phone higher. Her voice rang clear, a note of steel in it. "Mr. Blake, are you prepared for this to go public? Because every camera here has captured it." Jordan nodded once. "Good. Let the world see it. This was never about a seat. It is a mirror of how we decide who belongs and who does not." Maya Chen's phone buzzed in her trembling hand. Her live stream chat was exploding. 20,000 viewers now," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Her eyes shone as she turned the lens back to Jordan. "People are saying this is justice in real time. They are calling it history." Victoria suddenly snapped out of her paralysis. Her voice rose, shrill, breaking with panic. No, this is abuse of power. He cannot do this just because he is who he says he is. He is lying. He must be lying." But Naomi's livestream had already zoomed in on the glowing Blake Aerosystems logo, undeniable, captured from every angle. The comments scrolled like a flood. "That is the real CEO. She is finished. The airline will have to apologize publicly." Victoria's defiance cracked. Her blue eyes burned with fury, but her words faltered. I didn't know who you were. I didn't mean. Jordan's reply cut through her, stammering. Calm, but sharp as steel. Exactly. You did not know. And because you did not know, you allowed yourself to treat me as less than human. The problem is not that you failed to recognize me as the CEO. The problem is that you failed to recognize me as a man. The line struck like thunder. Passengers shifted, some bowing their heads, others nodding solemnly. A few eyes glistened with unshed tears. Captain Ruiz swallowed hard. His authority, once absolute in the cabin, now hung by a thread. Mr. Blake, what do you want us to do? Jordan's voice carried across the cabin, low but steady. What I want is simple. To be treated with the same respect as any other passenger who has paid for their seat. Nothing more, nothing less. The stillness deepened, broken only by the faint crackle of Maya's livestream mic. In that silence, the enormity of what had happened sank into every soul in the cabin. Isabella Cruz's pen scratched quickly across her notebook. She glanced up, her eyes locked on Jordan. You know this will not end here, don't you? Jordan's faint smile carried no warmth. I know, but it needs to begin here. The engines hummed outside, steady and indifferent, as though the sky itself had no interest in the turmoil brewing inside. But for everyone in that cabin, the world had shifted. A young man in row 5 whispered to his companion, He just turned this whole flight upside down. The companion replied softly, No, he turned the mirror on us. Victoria slumped in her seat now, her arrogance stripped bare. Her hands trembled, her carefully painted face cracking under the weight of humiliation. She glanced around desperately, but every pair of eyes that met hers carried no sympathy, only the sharp clarity of truth revealed. Jordan leaned back slowly, placing his phone face down on the tray table. He crossed his hands calmly, his voice dropping softer, almost intimate yet loud enough for all to hear. You see a man in a hoodie, out of place in this world of leather and champagne. But what you fail to see is that this man is not asking for privilege, only respect. Silence again. But this time, it was not empty. It was full, charged with a recognition that could not be undone. Then, quietly but unmistakably, the first clap broke the silence. A passenger near the back, a woman with gray-streaked hair, pressed her palms together once, twice, then again. Others followed. Applause spread slowly at first, hesitant, then stronger, echoing against the walls of the cabin until it filled the space. Victoria buried her face in her hands. Lena's eyes glistened with regret. Captain Ruiz lowered his gaze, the brim of his cap shadowing his face. And Jordan Blake sat motionless in 2A, his body calm, his spirit unyielding. The applause swelled, not for power, not for wealth, but for truth spoken aloud. The cabin of Flight 847 would never be the same. The applause lingered in the cabin, not thunderous but steady, like rain tapping against glass. Each clap carried the weight of recognition, of passengers realizing that something larger than a seat dispute was unfolding before them. Jordan Blake remained calm in 2A, his expression steady, his breathing measured. For years he had learned the art of restraint, of silence. But today the silence had ended. He looked across the rows of faces, strangers who now witnessed his truth, and he knew the moment could not simply fade. Victoria Langford sat collapsed in her seat, her platinum card still clutched in a trembling hand, the power she once wielded now reduced to a meaningless piece of plastic. Her lips moved, but no words came. Every time her eyes darted toward a passenger, The gaze she met was not sympathetic. It was judgment, sharp and cold. Captain Daniel Ruiz stood frozen near the aisle, his authority visibly slipping. His cap-brimmed, shadowed eyes that once carried certainty, but now betrayed unease. "Mr. Blake," he said carefully, his voice low, "we cannot allow this disruption to continue. For the safety of everyone, I must insist." Jordan cut him off gently, his tone calm but immovable. "Safety is not threatened by truth, Captain. It is threatened by injustice." The words rippled through the cabin. Even those who had stayed silent shifted in their seats, murmuring to one another. Maya Chen's phone quivered slightly in her grip. Her live stream counter surged past 30,000. The chat scrolled so quickly it was unreadable, but the tone was clear. The world was watching. Jordan reached forward, lifting his phone again. His fingers moved with deliberate precision. The glow illuminated his face as he tapped through encrypted layers, his screen displaying commands few outside of Skyreach's highest ranks had ever seen. A hush fell deeper. Passengers craned their necks, phones tilted higher. Victoria gasped sharply. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice pitched with fear. Jordan's voice remained steady, exercising authority, the kind that comes not from arrogance, but from responsibility. The screen flickered. A bold message appeared. "CEO override flight control." Gaffes erupted. Several passengers whispered in disbelief. Isabella Cruz's pen clattered to the floor as she grabbed her phone with both hands, recording with urgency. Jordan lifted the phone slightly higher, ensuring not only the passengers but also the thousands watching Maya's stream could see. "This aircraft is mine to command," he said softly, "and I will not allow it to carry forward with injustice unresolved." Victoria's voice cracked, shrill and panicked. "This is madness. You cannot do this just because of a seat." Jordan's gaze turned toward her, his tone cutting but calm. "It was never about a seat. It was about the way you believed you could diminish me, simply because I wore a hoodie, because you assumed I did not belong. If I allow this to continue, then every injustice like it will continue unchecked. Today it ends." The cabin trembled with whispers. Passengers turned to one another, some nodding, some still stunned into silence. Captain Ruiz's face paled. "Mr. Blake, please, this is highly irregular. Air traffic control already knows," Jordan replied. His thumb hovered above the confirm command. "One press and the tower will receive a direct instruction. This flight will return to the gate immediately." Lena Morris gasped softly, her hands flying to her lips. You would not?" Jordan's eyes locked on hers. "I would, because justice delayed is justice denied." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the engines droned steadily, indifferent to the storm brewing within. Then Jordan pressed. The phone emitted a sharp tone, the screen flashing confirmation. Within seconds, Captain Ruiz's headset crackled with a voice from the control tower. "Flight 847. We have received a CEO override. Confirm immediate return to gate." Passengers erupted in shock. Gasps, murmurs, frantic clicking of cameras. Some cheered softly. Others stared wide-eyed, their disbelief painted across their faces. Captain Ruiz froze, his mouth slightly open. Never in his career had he been stripped of command so publicly, and certainly not by a man seated among the passengers. His hand shook as he lifted his mic. "Control. This is Ruiz. Confirming return to gate." The words, once spoken, sealed the moment. Victoria clutched the armrests as though the seat itself were crumbling beneath her. Her carefully curated glamour shattered. Mascara streaked her cheeks. "No," she whispered hoarsely. No, you cannot ruin me over this. I did not know who you were. Jordan's reply was cold, steady. That is exactly the point. You did not need to know who I was. Respect should not depend on power or title. It should depend only on humanity. Applause broke again. Louder this time. Not hesitant, but firm. Several passengers clapped openly. The elderly couple in row 4 smiled faintly through tears. Thomas Gray bowed his head, whispering, "At last." Someone stood. Maya Chen's voice cracked with emotion as she whispered into her phone. 40,000 watching. They are calling it justice in real time. They are saying history is being made. The plane banked slightly, its nose angling toward the airport. The announcement crackled over the intercom, the voice of a junior flight attendant barely steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight will be returning to the gate due to a technical issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The lie fooled no one. Every soul in that cabin knew the truth. Jordan remained seated, calm, unyielding. His hoodie seemed almost like armor now, his plain clothes a deliberate statement. He had not raised his voice. He had not struck out in anger. He had simply held his ground and used the authority already his. Victoria trembled beside him, her eyes darting around as if searching desperately for an escape. But every lens, every pair of eyes, was trained on her. Isabella Cruz leaned forward, her voice low but carrying. "Mrs. Langford, I will be quoting you directly. People like me deserve priority. Are you certain you want that to appear in tomorrow's headlines?" Victoria flinched, her mouth opening and closing. No sound emerged. She sank deeper into the seat, her platinum card slipping from her fingers to the carpet below. Jordan spoke once more, his tone softer now, yet still resonant. "Remember this. We do not stay silent in the face of injustice. A single cabin may be small, but it reflects an entire society. And today, society is watching." The engines roared as the plane descended back toward the runway lights. Passengers leaned closer to the windows, but their focus never left the man in 2A. When the wheels touched down, the cabin jolted. But Jordan did not move. He sat still, his gaze calm, his presence filling the space more powerfully than any turbulence ever could. And in the silence that followed, the world outside already waited. The plane's wheels screeched softly as they met the runway, a vibration humming through the cabin. Outside, runway lights stretched like veins of fire in the night, guiding the aircraft toward the waiting terminal. Inside, silence reigned. Every passenger knew this landing was not just physical, but symbolic. Jordan Blake sat motionless in seat 2A, his hoodie collar resting against the headrest. His phone, now dark, lay on the tray table. The glow that had shaken the cabin still lingered in the eyes of every witness. He had not pressed another button since confirming the override. He did not need to. The storm had already begun. Victoria Langford slumped beside him. Her hands fumbled with the strap of her designer bag, her movements frantic, desperate, as though hiding inside leather and fabric could erase what had just unfolded. Mascara streaked her face, her hair loosened from its polished style. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, her confidence was gone. Captain Ruiz's voice finally broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated until we arrive at the gate." His tone wavered, the crisp command of a veteran pilot eroded by humiliation. The cabin's lights glowed brighter as the aircraft rolled forward. Outside, flashes flickered already, the telltale burst of cameras pressed against terminal windows. News had traveled faster than the plane. When the aircraft stopped and the seatbelt sign chimed off, the cabin doors opened with a hiss. A wave of air from the terminal rushed in, carrying with it the roar of voices, the snapping of shutters, the metallic scent of anticipation. Passengers leaned into the aisle, phones high, some whispering, some recording openly. The world was no longer waiting. The world was here. Jordan rose slowly, his movements deliberate, measured. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, then stood fully, his presence filling the narrow aisle more powerfully than any uniformed crew. His eyes swept the rows, calm and unwavering. Reporters crowded just beyond the jet bridge, microphones thrust forward like spears, cameras flashing, voices colliding in a storm of questions. "Mr. Blake, is it true you ordered the plane back? Was this about a seat or about discrimination? Will you fire the crew involved? What will this mean for Skyreach Airlines?" The questions pelted him, relentless, yet Jordan did not flinch. He walked forward with steady steps, every movement captured from 100 angles. Behind him, Captain Ruiz followed, his head bowed. Lena Morris trailed, her eyes glassy with tears, her hands trembling against her skirt. And then came Victoria, flanked by 2 security officers. Her once glamorous figure now looked small, broken. Booing erupted from the crowd of waiting passengers in the terminal. Some pointed phones at her face, shouting, "That's her, the one who tried to steal the CEO's seat." She tried to shield herself, her hands raised, but the cameras only closed in tighter. Jordan paused at the end of the jet bridge. The reporters surged forward. Flashes stung his eyes, but he did not blink. His voice, when it came, was steady and deep, cutting through the chaos with ease. "Yes," he said, his words clear enough for every microphone. "I am Jordan Blake, CEO of Blake Aerosystems, the majority shareholder of Skyreach Airlines. Yes, I ordered the flight back to the gate, and no, it was not because of a seat. It was because dignity is not negotiable." The terminal erupted in gas, then silence, then the frantic typing of journalists. He raised his hand slightly, commanding stillness. What broke my heart was not only the insult of one passenger. It was the way the captain and chief attendant chose convenience over justice, asking me, the rightful passenger, to move in order to protect someone with privilege. That is not reconciliation. That is compromise with injustice. The words rolled like thunder across the gathered crowd. Cameras tilted higher. Microphones leaned closer. Maya Chen, still live streaming, whispered into her phone, her voice trembling with awe. 60,000 watching now. People are chanting his name in the comments. Jordan turned his gaze toward her and gave a small nod. He knew his words were not confined to this terminal. They were traveling across the globe, flashing across screens, replaying in living rooms, cafes, classrooms. "What will change after this?" Isabella Cruz shouted, pushing her microphone closer. Jordan's expression did not shift. "Change begins today. Every crew member involved will be suspended pending investigation. Skyreach will launch a full audit of all discrimination complaints from the past 5 years. Most importantly, we will implement a transparent reporting system where every passenger has the right to be heard, no matter what they wear, no matter the color of their skin, no matter the balance of their bank account." The crowd erupted, reporters shouting follow-ups, passengers cheering. Some clapped, others raised fists in solidarity. Victoria tried once more to speak, her voice thin, breaking. "I did not know. I did not mean." Jordan's gaze turned toward her, his tone sharp but not loud. "Exactly. You did not know. And that is the heart of the problem. You did not need to know who I was to treat me with respect. Humanity should not require credentials. The terminal froze on that sentence. Phones rose higher. It was the kind of line that would replay in clips for weeks, carved into headlines, painted across protest signs. A man in the crowd called out, "You spoke for all of us." Cheers followed, echoing through the terminal. Jordan lifted his voice once more, steady and unyielding. Understand this. What happened tonight is not about one man in one seat. It is about a system that too often decides who belongs and who does not. Tonight, that system was forced to face itself. And I promise you, this silence ends here. Applause thundered. The terminal shook with clapping, chanting, and the constant flicker of cameras. Jordan stepped forward into the forest of microphones, into the sea of flashing lights, carrying with him not just the authority of ownership, but the weight of every silent passenger who had endured what he had just endured. The storm was no longer inside the cabin. It had burst into the world. The glass doors of the executive boardroom slammed shut behind Jordan Blake. The roar of reporters, the flash of cameras, and the chants from the terminal were sealed out like a storm raging beyond thick walls. Inside, silence pressed down. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and recycled air, but it carried the weight of fear. A long mahogany table stretched across the room. Around it sat Skyreach Airline's senior leadership. The CFO, pale and stiff. The COO, flipping nervously through papers. The HR director, lips pressed tight. The PR chief, his collar damp with sweat. On the wall, a massive screen displayed the airline's stock chart, bleeding red. Nearly 9% loss since the first live stream had spread across social media. Jordan entered not in a suit, but in the same black hoodie he had worn in the cabin. His presence eclipsed the carefully groomed executives, every step slow and deliberate, every glance cutting. He moved to the head of the table and sat down without invitation. No one challenged him. The PR chief cleared his throat, trying to fill the silence.
Mr. Blake, we can control this narrative. A press release, a formal apology, a promise to retrain staff.
Customers will calm down once they see we take it seriously. Or wrong. Jordan's voice cracked through the air like a gavel striking wood. It echoed in the polished room, leaving the PR chief trembling in his seat. Do you think I turned back a plane just to issue another hollow apology? No. What happened tonight demands more than words. It demands fundamental change. The room stiffened, eyes darted. No one wanted to meet his gaze. Jordan rose slowly, walking toward the massive screen. The red line of the stock chart plunged like a wound bleeding across the graph. He raised his hand toward it. This is why we are here. The market does not believe you are fair. They do not believe this company respects its passengers, and they are right. The CFO shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Blake, with respect, the costs of compensation, lawsuits, and PR campaigns will be enormous. Hundreds of millions. We have to consider. Jordan spun sharply, his dark eyes blazing. You think I am worried about a few $100 million? If we fail to act, Skyreach will lose billions when customers walk away. We do not sell seats. We sell trust. And tonight, that trust shattered. The words hung like smoke. No one spoke. The executive sat trapped between shame and dread. Jordan's voice dropped lower, steadier, but harder than steel. I want every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years made public. Every one of them. And I want the entire crew of Flight 847 suspended immediately. Captain Ruiz, Chief Attendant Morris, anyone who enabled what happened. The HR director's face paled. But Mr. Blake, the unions, The associations they will resist. They will claim Jordan cut him off, his tone sharp as a blade, then change the rules of the game. Skyreach cannot be a place where unions protect injustice. From this day forward, any employee found guilty of discrimination will be removed. No negotiations. A ripple of unease spread. Some executives glanced at one another, searching for courage, but finding none. The CTO, a man who had been silent until now, spoke with a trembling voice. "Sir, you mentioned transparency. Do you mean a full overhaul of reporting systems?" "Yes." Jordan's reply was immediate. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Starting next week, Blake Aero Systems will implement a real-time discrimination reporting platform, integrated directly into flight management software. Every complaint will escalate straight to leadership. No middle layers to bury it. Every case documented and made public. Silence ends here." The CTO blinked rapidly, his forehead beating with sweat. That would overhaul the entire system. It will set a precedent. The entire industry will be watching. "Good," Jordan said. "That is my goal." The COO leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Blake, with respect, such transparency will expose us to lawsuits, media attacks, even government inquiries. It could destabilize." Jordan's faint laugh chilled the air. "What destabilizes us is arrogance. What destroys us is silence. If this company collapses because it cannot treat passengers with dignity, then it deserves to collapse. But I will not let that happen. Not while I'm here." The room quaked under his words. Some executives swallowed hard, others lowered their eyes. The PR chief wiped his brow, his voice barely audible. "Sir, do you believe such radical steps could save Skyreach?" Jordan turned slowly, scanning the table. His gaze pierced each face, as if stripping away every excuse, every layer of self-preservation. "I am not saving Skyreach. I am giving it one last chance to save itself." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the hum of the projector seemed muted under the weight of his declaration. Finally, the general counsel, a man who had been silent until now, leaned forward. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Mr. Blake, I have sat in countless crisis rooms. I have drafted apologies, settlements, excuses, but I have never seen a CEO confront the mirror and force everyone to look straight into it. Tonight you did, and you may have just saved this company, not with spin, but with truth." Jordan returned to his seat at the head of the table. His hoodie hung loose, unpretentious, but it carried the weight of judgment robes. He placed his hands flat on the polished wood and spoke with finality. "Prepare for the storm, because this is only the beginning." The executives sat frozen, their carefully rehearsed strategies useless. In that moment, they understood the old world of loyalty programs and platinum privileges had ended. A new standard was about to be written, and Jordan Blake would carve it into the very bones of the industry. The sun had not yet risen, but the world was already awake. What began as a live stream from a cramped first-class cabin had spread like wildfire across continents. Screens flickered in living rooms, in cafes, in crowded subways. The name Jordan Blake blazed across headlines, hashtags, and news tickers in a dozen languages. On CNN, the banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "CEO orders plane, back to gate after discrimination incident." In bold letters above it, another line pulsed, "Dignity cannot be negotiated." Clips from Maya Chen's livestream replayed in endless loops. The moment Jordan stood his ground in seat 2A, the instant he revealed his override authority, the words that now echoed across social media: "We do not sell seats, we sell trust." At a small cafe in New Orleans, A group of black college students gathered around a single phone, their hands trembling as they replayed the clip. One young man whispered, "He spoke for all of us. He didn't wait until tomorrow. He did it right then, right there, in Chicago." A Korean-American family watched together at their dinner table. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand and said softly, "See, it is not always about staying silent. Sometimes one no can change everything." In Nairobi, a morning news anchor's voice rang clear. This man was not only defending his seat, he was defending the dignity of millions who have been told they do not belong. In Tokyo, a massive billboard lit up in Shibuya Crossing. The words glowed in bright white letters across the skyline. Dignity is not optional. Beneath it, Jordan's face in a plain hoodie, his gaze steady, unflinching. Markets trembled under the weight of the story. Skyreach Airline stock continued to fall, down 12% in less than 2 days. Analysts shook their heads, some declaring the airline doomed, others insisting it could survive if Jordan's reforms were real. But strangely, Blake Aerosystems stock surged. Investors sensed something new, that the man who had turned justice into policy was rewriting the rules of business itself. Financial commentators on Bloomberg spoke in hushed awe. This is not only an aviation story. This is a corporate governance story. Jordan Blake has shown that accountability is not a liability. It is a market advantage. Airline boardrooms across the globe scrambled into emergency meetings. In Dallas, executives at a rival carrier huddled around a table, their voices sharp with panic. If customers start demanding the Blake Protocol, if they expect transparency systems like his, we will have no choice but to follow. If we resist, we lose market share. In London, the CEO of a European airline admitted reluctantly to the BBC, "We are watching history unfold. The industry will not be the same." But while corporations calculated, ordinary people celebrated. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Dignity not negotiable. My Skyreach shame. Blake standard. Across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Videos of Jordan's quiet defiance played over music, speeches, and emotional captions. One clip showed the exact moment he said, "The problem is not that you did not know I was the CEO. The problem is that you did not see me as a human being." Within hours, the clip reached 20 million views. Inside Blake Aerosystems headquarters, lights burned late into the night. Engineers and designers worked frantically under Jordan's direction to finalize the discrimination reporting platform. Screens glowed with charts, lines of code, and prototypes. One young engineer asked in disbelief, "Sir, you want to deploy this across the entire airline network in just 60 days. That has never been done." Jordan stood at the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes reflecting the city lights. His voice was quiet but resolute. "We are not patching the old system. We are rewriting the rules." In the days that followed, the fallout deepened. Tabloids plastered Victoria Langford's face across covers. From platinum member to persona non grata, the headlines sneered. Every step she took was documented. Every word she spoke dissected. Her apologies, delivered through a lawyer, fell flat. To the public, she was no longer a loyal customer. She was the symbol of entitlement. Meanwhile, Jordan's words transformed into rallying cries. Civil rights groups quoted him at rallies. University students painted his phrases on banners. In one march through Los Angeles, hundreds of people wore hoodies in solidarity, chanting, "Silence ends here." At a civil rights conference in Washington, Jordan took the stage. He did not wear a suit. The hoodie remained. The crowd of thousands fell silent as he began. "I never set out to be a symbol. he said, his voice low but carrying. I only wanted to sit in the seat that was mine. But when society forces someone to fight for the right to exist, then every seat becomes a battlefield. Applause erupted, shaking the walls. He raised his hand, and the noise quieted. Flight 847 was only the beginning. From airlines, we will move to hotels, to banks, to hospitals. Wherever power exists, there must be transparency. Technology is the tool. What matters is that we refuse to stay silent any longer. The crowd roared. Some wept openly. Others lifted their phones, broadcasting his words to millions more. In the front row, Thomas Gray sat with his wife, their eyes glistening. The elderly black passenger who had witnessed the first confrontation now saw the wave it had unleashed. He leaned toward his wife and whispered, "It was not just his seat. It was all of ours. At the back." Maya Chen streamed every word. Her follower count soared past 200,000. She was no longer just a student with a phone. She had become a voice for a generation that had seen injustice too often and silence too long. And still, Jordan remained calm, his voice steady. He knew the storm was only beginning. Corporations would resist. Interest groups would fight back. But the sky itself was different now. For the first time, passengers who had once been voiceless had a tool, a voice, and a leader who refused to yield. Jordan closed his speech with words that would echo for years. True power begins not with a title or a card, but with one person daring to say enough. Tonight, I was that person. Tomorrow, it can be you. The applause thundered again, louder than engines, louder than any storm outside. Cameras flashed, chants erupted, and the wave continued to spread. The man who had been dismissed in a hoodie was no longer just a passenger. He was a flag planted in the sky. 60 days after the storm on Flight 847, the world was still talking. The hashtags had not faded. The debates had not cooled. And inside the headquarters of Blake Aerosystems, the work had not stopped for a single night. On a Monday morning, the announcement finally came. Skyreach Airlines unveiled the world's first real-time discrimination reporting system. A sleek interface, accessible from every passenger's phone, seat back screen, and even airport kiosks. The name was simple, but it carried weight. The Blake Standard. Jordan stood on a stage in the airline's operations center. The room buzzed with cameras, journalists, and skeptical executives from rival airlines invited to witness. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the new platform. Lines of code had become a shield for the powerless. "From today," Jordan said, his voice steady, "no passenger will ever be silenced again. Every complaint will be logged in real time, escalated directly to leadership, and made public. The days of burying problems in filing cabinets are over." He tapped a button on the screen. A demo alert appeared. Complaint received. Passenger denied boarding despite valid ticket. Status escalated. Resolution under review. The simplicity of it stunned the room. For decades, airlines had hidden behind layers of paperwork and customer service scripts. Now, the process was laid bare. Every passenger could see progress. Every leader was accountable. A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Blake, aren't you afraid this system will expose you to endless lawsuits? Won't customers abuse it?" Jordan met her gaze, his eyes calm. "Transparency is not a threat. It is a cure. If we lose lawsuits because we failed our passengers, then we should lose. If customers abuse the system, the truth will expose them too. But silence is the real poison." Applause erupted, not just from the crowd of advocates, but even from some rival executives who had resisted him only weeks earlier. In the days that followed, the system went live. Reports flooded in, hundreds, then thousands. Many were small, a rude tone, a dismissive gesture, a careless mistake. But others cut deeper, passengers told to move for no reason, families split across cabins, medical needs ignored until too late. The numbers shocked even Jordan. For years, complaints had been buried, minimized, denied. Now the truth spilled out like water from a broken dam. One evening, Jordan sat alone in his office, scrolling through the incoming reports. His reflection glowed faintly in the glass of the screen. A line caught his eye. Complaint from Flight 562. Passenger denied wheelchair assistance at gate. Staff response. Passenger told to be patient. Resolution pending. His chest tightened. He remembered his grandmother, years ago, struggling at an airport, brushed aside as though her pain was an inconvenience. He had carried that memory silently for decades. Now, here it was again, in a report written by someone else. Different person, same wound. He leaned back, his hoodie collar brushing his jaw. For a moment, exhaustion pressed heavy on him. Change came at a cost. Every report was a reminder of how much suffering had been hidden in plain sight. But then his phone buzzed. A message from Maya Chen. She had kept streaming, kept speaking. Her words filled the screen. Mr. Blake, people are already seeing change. A passenger in Houston reported discrimination yesterday. Within 2 hours, leadership called them directly to apologize. They cried when they told me. They said it was the first time they felt heard. Jordan closed his eyes, letting the message steady him. It was working. The weight was heavy, but it was worth it. Meanwhile, ripple effects spread. Hotels began discussing similar systems. Banks quietly studied the model. Even hospitals, institutions long shielded by bureaucracy, found themselves under pressure. Civil rights groups demanded it. Customers expected it. The Blake Standard was no longer just an airline tool. It was becoming a global benchmark. At a press conference in Brussels, a member of the European Parliament declared, "If American airlines can adopt transparency in discrimination reporting, then so can we. Let us not be left behind." In Johannesburg, activists painted murals of Jordan's face on concrete walls. The words "Silence ends here" scrawled in bold red letters beneath. Children in hoodies posed beneath the murals, raising their fists, but not everyone celebrated. Inside rival boardrooms, resistance grew. Lobbyists whispered that too much transparency could destabilize markets. Some CEOs grumbled that Jordan was reckless, that he was building expectations no company could meet. One night, after a long day of reviewing progress reports, Jordan sat in his apartment, lights low, the city stretching beyond the window. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Isabella Cruz. "Jordan, I want you to know the Washington Post is preparing a full investigative series on the Blake Standard. We will highlight its victories, but also its failures. Are you ready for the scrutiny?" Jordan typed slowly, each word heavy with truth. "If the system fails, then I should be exposed. Accountability must apply to me as much as anyone else." He set the phone down and stared at the skyline. The responsibility was immense. He had never wanted to be a symbol, but symbols were not chosen. They were forged. His thoughts drifted back to that night in seat 2A. The humiliation, the contempt in Victoria Langford's eyes, the silence of the captain, the trembling hesitation of the chief attendant. He remembered the ache in his chest when he asked himself if he should stay quiet once again, and the relief, sharp and burning, When he finally said no, he whispered to himself, "Every seat is a battlefield." The next morning, proof of victory arrived. A video surfaced online. A young black man in economy had been told to switch seats so a family could sit together. He refused, citing the Blake Standard. The incident was logged, escalated, and resolved in less than an hour. A supervisor arrived, apologized, and ensured he remained in his seat. The video spread with lightning speed. The young man smiled into the camera. "They tried to move me, but I said, 'Check the system.' And they did. And this time, I won." The comments flooded in. "This is working. Dignity protected. Silence broken." Jordan watched the clip in his office. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile spread across his face. This was what it was all for. The Blake Standard was no longer an idea. It was alive, breathing, reshaping lives seat by seat, flight by flight. And though storms would come, though resistance would rise, one truth had already taken root across the world: silence was no longer safe. The conference hall in Washington, D.C. was packed beyond capacity. Thousands filled the marble space, their faces lit with anticipation. The chandeliers above flickered as though even the light leaned closer to hear. At the back, cameras lined the walls. Phones were raised high. Screens glowed with live streams already reaching millions across the world. Jordan Blake stepped to the stage in his now familiar black hoodie. No suit, no tie, no polished armor. He stood as himself, a man who had once been dismissed in a cabin seat, and who now carried the weight of millions who had been silenced for too long. The hall fell quiet as he began. "I never asked to be a symbol," he said, his voice low but resonant. "I only wanted to sit in the seat I paid for. But when society forces someone to fight for the right to exist, then every seat becomes a battlefield." Applause thundered, rolling through the chamber like waves crashing against stone. Jordan raised his hand, and silence returned. What happened on Flight 847 was never just about me. It was about every person who has ever been told to be flexible. Every person who has been asked to move so someone more privileged could remain comfortable. Every person who has swallowed their anger in order to survive the moment. That silence has lasted too long. And silence, my friends, is complicity. The words carved themselves into the air. Some in the audience wept quietly. Others nodded, their faces set with recognition. Jordan continued, his tone deepening. "Today, the Blake Standard is reshaping airlines. But tomorrow, it must reach further. Hotels, banks, hospitals, schools. Wherever power exists, transparency must exist. Because dignity is not a luxury. Dignity is a right." The hall erupted again, cheers rising from every corner. A chant began to build. Dignity now. Dignity now. The rhythm shook the walls, but Jordan waited patiently, letting the power of the crowd run its course before speaking again. At the front row, Thomas Gray, the elderly passenger who had witnessed the storm in the cabin, sat with tears streaming down his cheeks. He gripped his wife's hand tightly, whispering, "It was not just his seat, it was all of ours. At the back." Maya Chen streamed every word, her follower count climbing higher by the second. She had started as a student with a phone, but now she was a voice for a generation that refused to accept silence. Jordan's voice softened. "Some ask if I am afraid of lawsuits, of backlash, of being torn apart by those who profit from silence. And the truth is, yes, I am. But fear does not excuse inaction. Fear is not permission to compromise with injustice. Fear only means that what we are doing matters." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then he leaned forward, his tone intimate, almost a whisper. The problem was never that people did not know I was a CEO. The problem was that they did not see me as a man. And until every one of us is seen for who we are, the work is not finished. The audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation that shook the floor beneath them. The roar lasted minutes, yet Jordan remained still, calm in the storm of adoration. And then a voice pierced the crowd, high, trembling, but clear. A girl no more than 10 stood on her chair, raising her hand. The hall quieted instantly as if pulled by invisible strings. Her voice wavered, but the words rang true. If one day I am treated unfairly, can I say no like you did? The question hung in the air, delicate and heavy. Thousands of eyes turned to Jordan. He stepped down from the stage, moving through the crowd until he reached the girl. He knelt so that his eyes met hers. Cameras zoomed, lenses clicking, but in that moment only two voices mattered. You not only can, Jordan said gently, you must, because if you stay silent, those who come after you will face the same. You are the change. The girl's eyes widened, and her small hands clutched the edge of her seat. Around them, the hall erupted in applause, tears flowing freely. Cameras captured the moment, immortalizing the image of a CEO in a hoodie kneeling to meet the gaze of a child, passing the torch to the next generation. When Jordan rose again, he turned back toward the audience. His voice was louder now, carrying the weight of conviction. Do not wait for a CEO to fight for you. Do not wait for someone else to say enough. True power begins when one person refuses to move, refuses to be silenced, refuses to believe they are less. Every seat is a battlefield, and every voice matters. The hall shook with chants once more. Silence ends here. Silence ends here. The world outside echoed the same. In Paris, students painted his words on banners. In Lagos, murals spread across walls. In Sao Paulo, families gathered to watch the live stream. In New Delhi, a journalist tweeted, "This is no longer about one airline. This is about humanity." In the days that followed, the story did not fade. Newspapers ran the headline, "From one seat to a global standard." Financial markets recalibrated. Airlines scrambled to adopt their own transparency systems. Hospitals and hotels began pilot programs. Civil rights advocates declared a new era. And yet, in the quiet of his apartment, Jordan stood alone at the window, the city lights stretching beyond him. The roar of the world faded. Only his heartbeat remained, steady and resolute. He whispered to himself, "I only wanted to sit in my seat." He knew the storms were not over. Resistance would come. Interests would fight back. But something irreversible had already happened. Passengers who had once been silent now had a voice. Leaders who had once hidden behind convenience now faced accountability. The balance had shifted. Jordan closed his eyes and allowed himself a small smile. He had not written the last chapter. He had only written the first, and the rest would be written by every person who dared to say no. And so, from a single stolen seat, a revolution began. Jordan Blake did not just reclaim 2A, he reclaimed the dignity of every passenger who had ever been told they did not belong. His quiet defiance turned humiliation into power, and power into change that spread far beyond the cabin walls. But beneath the triumph, a truth lingers. Why must it take influence, wealth, or hidden authority for basic respect to be honored? How many voices have been silenced because they lack the power to fight back? This story is not only about an airline. It is about us, our silence, our courage, and the world we choose to build. Let it be a reminder prejudice thrives in quiet corners, but it crumbles when one person dares to say enough. Carry that truth with you. See others not by their clothes, not by their color, but by their humanity. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can keep shining light on the stories that demand to be heard and prepare for the next one that will challenge us all.